Yeah, okay, no worries. After that, I did a bunch of different things. I never went to uni, got really, really shit grades. I'm a lecturer at Cambridge and a few other universities. I currently run an app called EQ, which is a mental health app. Highly recommend everyone downloads it. It is free. And I've worked at a bunch of other companies. I currently contract and run this company. But when I was running Image to Painting, before I sold it, the only area that I really understood that really connected with me was the marketing aspect of it. Like, how do I get this value and transfer it to the right people? How do I figure out who the right people are? How do I figure out who the right ways? And a lot of what we're about to discuss is kind of the learnings that I took from that and have expanded over time. Cool? Then this is talking about Tinder. This was my Tinder photo, and embarrassingly, it worked more effectively than my actual photo. If you want to learn more about me or get in touch, danieljohnson.xyz. Okay, cool. So there's a few rules that I found to be super, super effective, and they are talk to thy customer. And the reason why I say that is because so many people don't actually speak to their customers. They are the most important people in your either existing business or theoretical business. And it's so important that you speak to them. The closer you can get to them, the better. If you can sit them down and have a beer, great. If you can get them on Skype, fantastic. If you can get them to fill out forms and learn a bit more about why they do what they do, what problem you're solving for them, super important. Second is understand their landscape. And by that I mean, what is the environment that your business is operating in? Like really having a deep knowledge within that field is super important. On one hand though, I could say doing too much of that can make life a bit difficult because you're not necessarily naive enough to do the more interesting, exciting things that a lot of startups have done. But on the other hand, not knowing it well enough, I've seen from myself and from other people really affect how they progress. What works, number 3 basically means what works for your competitors doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. And that's super important. So you can learn and get inspired by them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that those particular activities are going to result in you being successful. Number 4 is testing. One of the biggest mistakes that I always made was just being too nervous about like running these marketing activities. Because I was like, I'm not a professional. I don't know if this is going to work or like how it's going to go, but like just testing and seeing what works and doesn't is the most effective means possible. And like people who are a lot more senior than me will say the same thing. Number 5 is focusing on the right questions, which kind of goes into number 6, but basically thinking about the really important stuff. So not thinking about vanity metrics, not thinking about things that don't matter, but like figuring out what is the big problem I'm solving. Hola, that's
Hi,
all good.
Sorry.
I'm Daniel.
I'm Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl.
Hi.
Nice
Hi.
to meet you. And no vanity basically means that running a startup is really hard. Growing it is even harder. And it's really easy to fall into the trap of focusing on things that don't matter. Things like, I don't know, website traffic, things like, unless it's like revenue or core to your product or the value that you provide, it's probably a wrong question. And it's really easy to get sidetracked by these other questions. And I still look at our page views and think, oh, great, we've got 50,000 hits, but how many actual conversions is that? Like focusing on the core metrics is super important. And you're thinking to yourself, sitting down, yeah, this is really basic stuff. It is, however, this is so important. And even when you're more experienced or more advanced, you're still gonna fail on some of these. And by adhering to these, it'll make your whole process so much quicker. Cool, does that make sense? Okay, so the way that I would like to operate this is feel free to ask questions when I'm chatting. There's a lot of information here. If you don't know something, if I've explained it to you quickly, ask me and we'll take it from there. Woo. Okay. So I talked about growth marketing. I want to talk really briefly about what growth is compared to and its relationship with marketing. So I came up with a really cool quote, which I quite like. Growth is the process of increasing your one metric that matters by looking at all areas of a startup. So essentially that's, you've got one goal that you're trying to fix or trying to change, one specific KPI or metric in your business. That could be revenue, that could be month-to-month growth, that could be establishing a product, anything like that. But it's really important to understand what that is because every activity that you do should affect it. However, if you don't know what that is, you don't know if that's going to affect it. So growth is this experimentation, process-driven method of changing that. We're going to be discussing the process and how it works and how I do it later on. And then Steve Blank, who is like a godfather of modern-day startups, said a startup is an organization formed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model, which really ties into that because basically it's this search, it's this adventure, it's this trying to find something that really works in terms of product market fit. There's a bit of theory at the beginning. It's boring, I know, but we'll get on to the fun stuff shortly. Okay, so one of the things that I want to teach you, and is relevant to other slides, is a growth funnel. Who here has seen this before? No? Okay, cool. We've only got one person, that's fine. Okay, so the growth funnel is basically a process that your customers go through when they're getting the value of your product, right? So it's created by, this version was created by Dave McClure, but it's existed in various different forms over the past few years. So we start at awareness, and then we take a user down all the way to referral. For some business models, not every stage is in the right order or needs to be there, but it's a good idea to have an understanding of how this process works. So we've got key performance indicators, which are essentially ways of tracking each stage, trying to figure out how do you measure activation, and then your metric. So this is a fake e-commerce website that I've based it on. The KPIs will obviously change based on what your product is. So for awareness, that is when they first discover your product. That could be through an advert, that could be through someone chatting to them about it. That could be them through reading a blog article, things like that. And one way to measure that is through reach or impressions. So if I post a blog out there, I can measure how many impressions, so how many people saw that particular blog. After that, we have acquisition. Acquisition is generally the first stage. Go for it.
Sorry, would it be possible to receive the
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, you'll be getting this.
Thank you.
So acquisition is essentially the time that the first stage at which a customer interacts with your business in some respects. So that could be signing up, that could be downloading an app, things like that. So it's when people take concerted action to interact with your business in some respect. Cool? I'm slightly nervous because Flekia knows a lot more about some of this than I do, so I feel like she's thinking, Daniel,
Not at all.
what a dick. After acquisition, we have activation. So activation is generally when someone receives the core value of your product. So for example, if I was Uber, I might say activation is when someone orders a cab and is in the cab, and it's arrived quickly, it's cheap, it's efficient, and it worked properly. That's what is the problem you're solving? And activation is very often the time that you're actually providing that that value to your customer. After that, we have revenue. This one's a bit debatable. I never actually included it in any of my own things, but Dave McCall said it should be there, so I'm going to include it for you guys. Depending on the type of business, you might have revenue between activation and retention, which is actually when someone pays you money for your service. Retention is basically when someone stays with you for an extended period of time. So they don't just get the value once, but they use your products again and again over time. And then referral is basically when you have a super loyal customer who loves your product, it's very likely that they know other people who might be interested in your product. So what you're trying to do is understand at what stage are your customers working, creating KPIs so you can identify any areas that they may have trouble on. So for example, if we had 1 million impressions and it went here and we 10 signups, there's obviously something wrong at this stage, right? So by measuring all that, it helps you figure out how is your funnel working, how is your customer acquisition working. Cool? Does this make sense to you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Because I've been working in this field so long, I might say things that don't make sense. And if they do, please call me out on it and I'll break it down. There's also a ton of great material on this that explains it probably more efficiently than I did.
Is there a figure that one should be aiming for? So I can see obviously you have 1 million impressions there. Is that something that a business should aim for.
Yeah.
And then in terms of like click-throughs, I was always under the impression that it's usually like a percent or something, like in terms of conversion or.
Yeah.
So would that apply in this instance?
Sure. So basically, the flow between awareness and referral, there are industry standards, but there are so many different factors depending on your type of customer, the type of industry, the type of product you're starting, your customer's life cycle. There are probably sort of industry statistics that will be able to help you provide sort of like a benchmark or some sort of like rough estimate of what is good and what is not.
Okay.
But use that, but then also think to yourself, like, what have I done so far? And like, what is a realistic growth and what is super optimistic growth? And like, challenge yourself to try and make this as best as you can. Awesome. Any more questions? Hello.
Hey.
I can't leave. They are.
Sorry.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about 5 main things. We're going to be talking about creating a brand, creating a community, looking at social media, what growth hacking is, and email. Who here has heard of growth hacking? Right? Okay, I'm excited to talk about that a bit later. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I didn't even create that animation, that's great. I get so many loans for, like spam loans for some reason. So one of the things that I really love is that I feel startups have really embraced a process of driving growth. And as you can see here, these are a bunch of, well, some of them are startups, and you can see how quickly it took for them to get to $1 billion valuation. Now, I'm not an academic and I'm not an economist, but in my personal opinion, I believe that one of the biggest factors that has helped startups is this process of figuring out product market fit, figuring out customer acquisition on a lot faster, more iterative model than existing sort of more legacy companies. Customer research. So this is my favorite area, and this was something that I never did. Right, I found it so dull, which is kind of ironic when you're running a business, actually speaking to your customers. But I would argue it's one of the most poorly executed parts of running a startup. It's one of the most misunderstood, and it's really, really bad. Who here has heard of milkshake test? Shut up. Anyone? No? Okay, cool. So I'm about to butcher this, and I want you to correct me. But McDonald's?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to say it, and then he's going to tell me where I went wrong.
I'm sure your story will be fine.
Okay. So basically, McDonald's was finding that they were experiencing an increase in milkshake sales, and they wanted to figure out why. So they hired this guy. His name was this academic from Harvard, and they were trying to figure out like what was it about. Why were these milkshakes sales increasing? So what they did is they got this guy to basically sit in a McDonald's, watch the people and interview them as they were buying these milkshakes. And what they found really interestingly was that one of the fastest growing user segments of milkshakes were like middle-aged men on their way to work. And they were trying to figure out, this is so not expected because we expected from their research like teen girls to be the primary users of milkshakes users. So they interviewed them and they were trying to figure out like, why are you buying a milkshake? And they found out that why these guys were buying milkshakes was because they were going to work at 8, 9 a.m. They were really bored, they hated their job, they had a bit of a drive, they had to stay in traffic. They wanted something that they could eat, something that was easily holdable in a cup holder, right? I don't know why I'm like doubting my own English right now. It was portable and it was tasty, and that was the thing. It was a treat. It was exciting. It was nice. It was enjoyable. So basically, they found that their user segment wasn't who they originally thought, and they were able to create marketing campaigns to try and attract this other organic segment. And the reason I'm telling you this is because very, 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 very often, the person you think is buying your product isn't necessarily the person who is actually buying the product. And that's why customer research is so important. It's not even just about like the demographic, it's more about what are they trying to solve. I've read his book so many times. as this guy said, it's like, what job are they trying to solve, right? So these guys are trying to solve a tasty breakfast that's not necessarily nutritious, but convenient and portable, right? And actually going back to, I was talking to someone about my app a second ago, and I run this mental health app targeting 18 to 28-year-olds. And what we found recently is that we were getting a lot of feedback from middle-aged men as well. And it was males living in rural areas, and they were saying thank you for developing this app and promoting it, because it's helped me to be able to communicate more effectively with my wife. So when you're creating an app, and it's got cartoons and like princesses and dragons and shit like that, and you receive an email from Bob54, middle of Oklahoma, saying, my relationship with my wife has never been better, that's fantastic news.
You should send him a McDonald's milkshake voucher.
That's what I should do next, right? Right? But it's so easy to not understand what problem your product is solving. And it's really important when you're starting a business to really make sure that you're always understanding, like, how are people using your product and what their demographics are, because that helps you develop the product more efficiently, helps you to make sure your marketing campaigns align, this kind of thing. I want a milkshake now. I'm really nervous about the emails that are popping up.
You can get rid of them.
I don't know what's there, so I apologize. Okay, so some of the rules that I try to hold myself to is the closer you can get to your customer, which is why I'm a really big fan of like having a beer or having a coffee with them. Not recently actually, a few years ago, I had a coffee with a customer when I was running an e-commerce platform called ShopRocket. And as we were chatting, we were talking about why they use their product, how they use the product, all this kind of thing. And I was like, so how would you describe this, just casually? Like, this is now a question that should be asked, but I completely made it up on the spot at the time. How would you describe this product to your friends in the industry? And they came up with a one-sentence phrase that I completely forgot right now, but essentially it was a much better way of describing a product. So I took that sentence and I recorded it, and I stuck it in Google Ads with some of our existing copy. And it was the most effective ad we've ever run. And I love that, because the way that you describe something, because you're around it so long, and the insights that you derive are going to be not necessarily as effective or customized as your customers can produce. Second is understanding them as a person. So not just understanding, like, they're not just a customer for your product, they are also a human being with interests and passions and social groups and different other actions. And understanding them as a human being and the different facets of their life will help you to be able to develop your product more effectively and to do marketing so it's aligned to those customers really well. And third, talking a bit about the milkshake test, is understanding what is the job that they're trying to solve with your product. Like, it might not be what you think it is. Okay, so when I'm doing customer research, there's a few tools that I tend to use quite regularly. I try to speak to my customers in person as much as I can, but if I need like generic data, there's a few tools here. Who's heard of Facebook Audience Insights? Okay, so got one. I'm talking about HyperX people here. Got one. Okay, cool. You're gonna love this, right? So essentially, it's a tool designed to help people create better ads on Facebook, but you can use that data really effectively for all sorts of different other things. And I'd highly recommend you check it out. It's completely free. It's run by Facebook. That is a hyperlink, so when I send you the PDF, you can just click on it. Who's heard of YouGov? Okay, got a few more on that one. YouGov is essentially a place where people ask lots of questions to the general public, and there is a ton of information that is really useful and really interesting and can help you understand your customers more effectively. Google Trends shows you what kind of terms are being searched, so stuff that's getting really popular. I find this really useful actually when I was doing e-commerce stuff, and I was able to create e-commerce stores when looking at Google Trends, finding what was hot before it was like really sort of peaked. And number 4 is the Pew Research Center. The data is mainly US centric, but it can be really effective as well. Does anyone else have any other tools that they use that they think is super good and would like to mention? Okay, go for it, James.
You've got Google Consumer Reports.
Google Consumer Reports. You know, that's a really good one.
And you've also got OnePulse.
Wonderpulse.
OnePulse.
OnePulse. What's OnePulse?
Say you want to survey people within your
Do you
customer
want to sit
demographic.
here?
So say you want to survey people inside your customer demographic. You can get all your answers to 3 questions within 5 minutes. So it's one of the top survey tools used by people like Marks and Spencer's to figure out what kind of puddings they should have in the future for Christmas.
Puddings. Nice. Cool.
What was it called again? Sorry.
OnePulse.
Who here has created a customer persona? Hopefully everyone in the room. Yeah? Okay, let me rephrase that. Who here hasn't created a customer persona before?
I was a bit unclear on exactly what you mean by customer persona.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, so basically a customer persona is a good way of assembling all the different types of data that you have, or like guesstimates, on who your customer is for your product. Now, you often get multiple different types, so say McDonald's continues to sell to middle-aged people and teens, they might have 2 customer personas, and you often have like primary or secondary depending on how engaged they are with the product or what jobs they are trying to solve. I like it because it helps you figure out the human as a whole. It helps you figure out not just the direct aspects that affect their relationship to you as a business, but also adding other aspects like, you know, where do they eat? What kind of magazines do they read? What are their hobbies? That kind of thing. It's amazing the kind of insights you learn from learning things that don't seem relevant to your business. I found out when I was at ShopRocket, this e-commerce platform designed for small businesses, that a really effective marketing campaign is targeting, what's it called when someone needle and thread, they make a blanket or something. Knitting. Targeting knitting groups was one of our most effective marketing campaigns. And I had no clue, right? Absolutely no clue. But by understanding that, like the customer as a whole, I was able to figure out, okay, so a lot of our customers happen to be in knitting clubs, right? So how do we use that? How do we learn more about that? And when you're looking at your customer, it's super important to learn a bit more about them. So this is an example of a customer persona. Admittedly, this is one when I typed customer persona into Google Images and found one. There are a lot of different types, and there are different tools that can help you. So HubSpot have a really cool tool that I think is primarily for B2B, but check it out anyway. And it's like a customer persona generator. So on this one here, we have some basic demographic information of like age, location, occupation. And then we have other information like what are they trying to achieve with their product? So what are the problems they're trying to solve? What are the jobs to be done? What are the challenges? Is it difficult to access your product? Is it expensive to access your product? Is it, if you're selling into a corporate, for example, they might have issues with bureaucracy or getting approval. Preferences, so you might find it difficult to figure out preferences as in, you know, do they prefer an app? Do they prefer a web-based interface? Do they prefer a desktop application, or maybe they want to access this through their browser? That kind of thing. And then one of the other aspects that you can include potentially is touch points, but actually that is a bit complicated for this conversation today. But I'm going to send you the HubSpot URL and some other information that helps you figure that shit out. Cool. I highly recommend that you create customer personas as early on as you can. They're living, breathing documents, so as you continue your business, you might create more, you might modify existing ones. In my bedroom, I actually have a customer persona in A1 stapled to my wall, which is very sad because if anyone comes in there, they're like, why is there a guy called John staring down at you? But it helps you figure out so many different types of things, and it helps you align all your different thoughts, so you're focusing on the right kinds of people. Any questions? So if I got you guys to all create a customer persona right now, you'd be like, on it. Okay, cool. That wasn't planned, but I might do that as a like mini break. So that was like a really sort of super short customer research segment. Does anyone have any challenges or like any thoughts on researching their customer for their business?
Mainly when you're looking at kind of predicting the LTV, the acquisition costs and stuff like that. If you haven't started trading and you don't actually know how much you're going to sell within a year, how can you really kind of predict accurately
Right.
what the LTV would be per customer?
So I absolutely hate doing that because whenever I'm working with startups, they often, like, investors want to understand that information. And I'm like, we have no data to go on. So I have to look at like industry averages, what competitors are doing, that kind of thing. I really wish I could give you an answer right now and you'd be like, this is great. And I'm not going to, because the problem is when you're estimating these kind of numbers, you can use your best guess and the data available. But realistically, I've found that I'm not very accurate with that. It's very often very different. Do you guys have any? I feel like James has a thought on this one.
What do you want to know?
Just when you're kind of predicting, for example, LTV.
How do you accurately predict stuff like LTV with limited data?
I think it depends on if she has a persona or not. If she's testing her market segments rather than just going for one persona straight from launch.
It's not very easy, to be honest.
No, it's not easy.
Sorry, who's James? Please.
Sorry, James is a friend of mine. He also works in startups, and he's like the guy I go to when I struggle with things. So I'm hoping he's gonna like correct me when I'm wrong and answer some questions here. And Jerome and Flick also reference, and Rosa at the back.
Hi guys.
I like how we formed this like little circle around.
Sleep cell everywhere.
Okay, so I'm happy to chat about customer research in more detail. It is super important. Don't forget it. It is really integral to developing a product, and it's one of the biggest mistakes that I regularly see when I'm contracting for startups and I go into them. One of the first things they ask is like, what problem are you solving? Who is your customer? That kind of thing. And it's really interesting because when I interview individual founders of startups, and each founder so far has told me something different in every company I've ever worked with. So having that aligned and having that really understood is so important. And you'll realize this like a year, 2 years into your startup. You'll think, damn, I wish I did this sooner. Because it is a bit boring and it's not the most exciting activity, but it is so important. Creating a brand. Creating a brand can be one of the most difficult aspects of running a business. My background is in performance marketing, which is basically like, how do we acquire customers as efficiently and effectively as possible? I'm good with numbers, I'm not very good with creatives. Fortunately though, there's hopefully some activities in here which will help you figure that out. Okay, so what is a brand? I really love this quote by Jeff Bezos. Your brand is what people say about you after you leave the room, about your company after you leave the room. And I really like that because I was trying to think of a really cool quote to stick in this on the way here, and I was thinking to myself, like, these brand definitions are so nondescript and so sort of ethereal, but I feel like this is a really good way. It's like how people feel about your company. Yeah, I think it's really good. So the 4 areas that I find it really useful is looking at having a good brand involves your company's identity and personality. So like, if you personified your brand, what would that person look like? How would they act? That kind of thing. It helps you to provide direction in terms of both marketing and product. It helps you become more memorable, which is really difficult considering there are like 10,000 startups created every day. And it helps you focus. A lot of people have a lot of ideas about what their brand should be or how they want their brand to be. But getting that down on paper is really, really difficult. And it's something I've struggled with. I'm not going to read that quote to you. Okay, so we're going to run a few small 5-minute activities to help you flesh out some of the brand of your products. Woohoo! Woo! Okay, cool. So each of you either have a startup or you choose one, pick one, work in pairs, and for 5 minutes we're going to do a bunch of different activities for 5 minutes each. So the first one here. So the first one here is the 20-year timeline. I want you to use either a laptop or pen and paper and to write down now 5, 10, 15, and 20. And I want you to write down what are the most significant milestones at each period, so at 5, 10, 15, and 20. And I know this is like a big ask because you're probably really early stage, but use your like creative juices, be really inspirational, think to yourself, at 5 years, I want to dominate Europe. At 20 years, I want to be, I don't know, a FTSE 100, stuff like that. So it's kind of like dream setting to a certain extent, but let's have a go, and we're going to pick on some people and figure out what theirs are. Do you have a question? Okay, cool. Does everyone understand the task?
Sorry.
Okay, no, that's absolutely fine. So, on a piece of paper, you can draw this, you can list it, and at each point, at each segment, try to come up with where you want your business to be at each period, right? Any other questions?
I mean, it's not necessarily related to this, but previously you'd mentioned several individuals as you were going through this. I was wondering, is there any way you could kind of list out the individuals you kind of either researched or used as part of your presentations?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I will have a think about it, write it down, and send it to you guys. Some really cool books and articles from really cool people.
Thank you.
Okay. And I don't bite. You guys can like talk to each other about this. It's fine.
So how are you doing?
Fine. I need a wee really badly.
And that's just been caught on video.
So do you guys want to work together? I know you've got different businesses, but like if you can bounce ideas from each other, that would be really cool. Oh, I just got your text.
What kind of business do you run? Or is this your business?
No, it's the business. It's a marketplace, peer-to-peer for service exchange. Peer-to-peer, like no companies involved. So basically, if you need to get something done, you just make a post about that you need to get done.
Is this like TaskRabbit?
No, because TaskRabbit, they own the people and they send their employees to your place. So this is totally different because it's between peers. You can sign up in the app and apply as an individual in a different tasks that other people are posting. So I'm not going to hire you, I'm only a marketplace.
Fleeting build.
They will come together. So what is your
And then they'll
property? Two?
Yeah, there's probably less than one.
I was like,
No, it's very interesting.
But what I'm trying to understand is how it's gonna work, like in the interaction between the people that I'm gonna use the app. So, no, it's fine. I just that I So how do you see your business in 20 years?
Where is it now?
I mean, it is really it's a good way of just like
Do you still have the business, or do you think you would sell it?
I don't know if I see myself in it. I doubt
Why does your business exist? That's not a why. I want to know, like, why do people care? Why do you care about spending more time on this?
right? Yeah, it's interesting.
Is it making money? Is it doing networks? Is it fixing some problem?
Okay, so we've got it like.
So in 2 years, like, you may have sold a product. You've got another 3 years to get another 5 million. So what does your then become after you sold the product?
Yeah,
So it looks like most of that is and it's a marketplace, so you're going on that margin. Do you hope to break even? When do you hope to break even on your platform?
1 year.
1 year.
And what I'm expecting is 4 or 5 years we have launched like successfully the internet in the UK.
It's fine, just do 10, 15,
And then
20, 1 second.
5 year to between 5 and 10 years. Start like tackling different countries till 10 year maybe reach the entire continent, maybe Europe. And then maybe 15 years Asia, Africa, Middle East. So in 20 years I can be like worldwide. Or maybe that's too long, maybe faster.
I think that as your growth starts to exponentially, it takes a lot less time after you conquer Europe to go and see Asia or the US.
So do you
You'll
think
have
it's
so
gonna be
many more
faster?
people, yes. Well, I mean, I don't know how long it will take you to break even with marketplace. So, with a marketplace. So I imagine that for you to take over Europe, it's going to be 5 to 7 years, but then global level that could be 10.
Yeah, I'm agree with you. But I'm then 15, 20 years. I don't know. It's difficult to think that further, that far. It's like difficult to imagine how it's gonna be 20 years from now. A lot of things can happen in the marketplace, like everything will change, people's behavior, trends, whatever. So maybe it's gonna be evolving.
Yeah.
So in 20 years, maybe it will be something totally different.
What made you want to do this business?
What made me do?
This idea.
Oh, because I had the necessity.
Sorry?
I had the necessity
Necessity to
to
create
get
business.
access to something new.
Ah, okay.
I feel like I felt the necessity to have access to a similar app similar to this in order to earn my own money, like self-employment. And figure is different because it's for basically you are a programmer or a developer or UX UI designer, you know? You need to do something in order to can participate in
Google
feedback.
created a design
So this is more like informal task. It's more like running errands for other people. Basically, you don't need to have a degree for participate in this app and earn your money. You just need to have ethics and you need to be responsible and you need to treat well the customers that you are serving. That's my brief of time.
It's these kind of
So
things
like
which
that's
help
kind
us
of my
boil
vision
down
and
to
these
the
are the
essence of
groups that I can help and bring together.
represent.
Okay.
Right? And this is really difficult. It's not a test. Do it at home, share it with the cohort. So if you can't do it, like, get up to 5 minutes. Okay, cool. Sorry, John. Ciao. Do you want to move up so you're not on your own? Okay. Hey guys. Okay, so I'm about to repeat myself again, but like these activities are actually supposed to take a lot longer, and we don't have that time. So what I'm going to try and help you with is to get you to do these for like 5 minutes and expand them on your own later at home. Once you've completed them or done as much as you would like to do, share with the cohort. Feel free to tweet me, email me, visit my website, do that thing, and I'm happy to provide. I can't even provide feedback really because they're not yes or no. They're not. No one answers here are right or wrong. But I'm happy to have a conversation about like expectations and stuff like that. So, how did you find that so far? Fun. I like that. Who wants to give a example of some of the things they stuck for, say, 5 years?
So I said just sort of have development completely built and it's launched, it's out there, and just have all foundation blocks complete.
Okay. So complete development
Yeah.
within 5 years.
Yeah, and have people use it.
Yeah. Do you have a number?
Number of users, that I don't know, no. No, I haven't got any numbers, but million, maybe a million people
Sure.
in 5 years, I don't know.
How about yourself?
Isn't that easy to go further than 10 years, but mainly acquiring new kind of territories, new locations, spreading out further out into Asia,
Mhm.
because stuff like that. Yeah, no, we haven't really thought about it. I'm thinking between now and the next 3 months, to be honest with you, and my LTV, but yeah, that's the best I can
Sure.
think of right now.
How about you guys in the front here? Well, sort of the front.
I found kind of difficult to project the business 15 years onwards because it's kind of a lot of things can happen at that time, like changes in trends, people's behavior, interests, whatever. So I guess like my business needs to be evolving with global changes. So maybe in 15 years could be something totally different that I'm having right now. So yes, but like during the first 5 years, I see myself like launch like in the UK and positioning like very well. I don't know, maybe 1 million subscribers during that time, and then 10 years I can imagine the business in the whole continent like Europe. With I don't know, maybe 17 million millennials subscribing the app. Very like I mean,
Which
there are
segment is
70 million millennials in the UK, so I guess I can have 70 million in 10 years in Europe. So.
this? Okay, cool. Yeah.
Mm.
Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to tell the class?
Yeah, we were kind of thinking during the 5 year period, we were hoping to have this app progressing through multiple countries, have a very large kind of user base in Europe, and like progressing through Africa and Asia, as well as having users in America, and hopefully around 2 million users. And further on from that, we were kind of again having issues after the 10-15 period. But say for instance 10 years in, we just want to be a stable known brand. By 15 years in, we were hoping to be an international staple, like something like Facebook or Twitter. And then 20 years time, we're just hopefully consistently keeping up with trends and in that case, like, you know, continuously
Mm.
updating or maintaining our user base.
I really like that. I think you've got some really interesting segments, really interestingly aligned. Write that down on a big piece of paper, stick it on the wall, and see where you are in like 5, 10, 15, 20. I'm really interested to see that. Cool, so we've got a lot to cut through. So I'm going to crack on with this. Again, do it later at home at Revere with friends. Who has heard of, what's this framework called? Is there a word for
The
it?
Golden Circle.
The Golden Circle. Who's heard of the Golden Circle? Okay, we've got 2 people. Oh, charming. Okay, so who's seen this TED Talk?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm excluding you two and you two from all my future questions. Okay, so we're gonna watch this. It is like 5 minutes long, and usually I don't do this, but I love this video. I think it's amazing. Can you hear the back?
I call it the Golden Circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat screen TVs. They've been making flat screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. And Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products. And nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. When we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. You know, sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and figures and they say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right. Because the part of the brain that controls decision making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say you're leading with your heart or you're leading with your soul. Well, I hate to break it to you, those aren't other body parts controlling your behavior. It's all happening here in your limbic brain, the part of the brain that controls decision making and not language. But if you don't know why you do what you do, and people respond to why you do what you do, then how will you ever get people to vote for you or buy something from you, or more importantly, be loyal?
It's amazing. We sent a man to the moon decades ago, but we still can't play a video in a presentation effectively. How do you guys find that? Did you find that useful? So here's a full TED Talk, which I think is a whole like 14 minutes long, which goes into slightly more detail and it goes over the bits a bit more effectively. But I absolutely love the Golden Circle. James here is actually the guy who introduced me to it, and it is really, really effective because it's very easy to think about ourselves in like really we don't think about the why behind a lot of action, and this is a good way to process that, to think that, to stick down the thoughts that we have. So who can guess what we're about to do next?
Find the why.
Well done. Well, we're going to be doing a golden circle. So, who feels like this was enough information that they can do it? Okay, who doesn't feel like it was enough information? Okay, cool. No, it's good, it's good, it's good. Yeah, I knew that. I was just testing. So this one is also super, super simple. So I'm going to get you guys to do the same thing. Create a big circle, write why, how, and what in increasingly smaller circles, and to fill that in for their brand. There is no right or wrong answer on this. This isn't a test. So don't feel like, write down your thoughts, and we'll take it from there. Cool? Okay, we've got 5 minutes on this one as well, for something that should be like iteratively created over the course of your business.
So I asked you before why you wanted to do these businesses. It's slightly different because it's why your company says to the customers in order to get
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Can you give an
Do you understand
example
the value behind it?
how or why could it be?
I mean, Apple's one is a good one. Talk.
So yeah, do you wanna
And if you look at the websites for Dell versus Apple, all of Apple's marketing message is always about how a customer would use their products. So it has an extra long battery life because it won't do X, Y, and Z. Whereas if you look at Dell, then you'll see front and center the price,
Instant and
the
accurate.
tech specs, the latest like 7 processor, and this much RAM. But then they also have like so many different models. You're not quite sure what you're looking for. I mean, at the moment, it sounds like you're doing a decentralized marketplace. So you could say, I'm trying to bring democracy to sharing services.
It's like
Can I give a suggestion? From knowing very little about your business idea. If I was to write something,
This is
and
what
again,
works. Is it
That might
software
be
that you sell to a realtor?
Your
or-
why is
Kind of.
not
So
the process
so that's
of
one element.
sharing the
Back end.
contact details. It's
Okay.
helping people connect faster. Is the why about
So
building something that you're
I
also
guess
trying to do
both.
apart from
When
making a lot of
looking
money
at the
is to help people connect.
Also for the user,
Um,
target is the frustration.
It's not even so much about the what, like by having an app that's NFC enabled where two people can share details. It's more a case of
I think you need
like
to.
when Facebook talks
you
about
both need to put this out.
talk about how can
you
communities,
send
how can build communities or
or
something,
customer,
which is not
does your brand
exactly
focus
what they do, but it is
So
kind of
you
like
have
half.
two being the end user, which could be
Does that make sense? There's a why behind it.
the realtor, the collaborators.
What is the problem? It's not just the problem you're solving. It's
For who's the person?
it's the inherent value of the brand,
End use action.
which in your case I would see is the
as much
helping
as
people connect more effectively.
They will reach out.
Okay.
Does that help you to an extent?
Any vegetarians or anything?
Yeah, I mean purpose is definitely part of it.
Pizza?
Jerome, vegetarian.
It's kind of difficult.
Thanks, Jago. Is that vegetarian? Looks like it. Looks really
Right.
good. Yeah, it looks boring. There you go.
Thank you.
Sweet. Thank you. That's all right. Does it make lunch?
I don't understand.
How about you? What's your why?
I was actually studying.
I put it under.
Thank you.
Talking about how beautiful it is when you get so close together, you can be so aligned if you both look
To deliver
exactly
health
the same direction.
to
How exciting it is
manage
that we
to
get
help people be
so aligned. It's the kind of radiation of power and beauty of that feeling. And then it's around the fact that he felt that with her
To identify numbers, statistics, maybe.
Once the process is finished, the user will
Yeah.
but I think
Yeah, I'm again,
dig up
Yeah.
there's no right or wrong, I'm more curious to hear your
Was that bullshit?
I'm just gonna
It's a bullshit. They just kind of created that story as well.
they were
And if they're working with a realtor who doesn't use your software, then does that mean it's going to work for that?
but maybe we
Because I'll give
that's
you
all right.
an practice where
Now you can
someone
say so,
refers
like we
your software to the agent. They might buy it. So therefore, so your brand is
It's not about just the
Or it could be that your customer
end.
sees trust and security aspects. But if you had a company website, it's mostly
It's like the same
saying
How's your one?
It was alright, like my sister kind of did a little bit more but in general,
Yeah, no,
I agree with it.
well, as in like,
People connect
in
with
direction.
Building relationships.
like when you're in a workshop, you don't care what
charge for that.
person you're in there says.
Oh, no, Daniel.
It's okay.
We know the why versus the how and the what. So yeah, I don't know. But expand on this, build it up, get feedback on it, send us an email, how can I get it?
Definitely, because yeah, this is a great method.
It's so good.
I never would have thought that without this more.
So much more. And I just myself, I'm so grateful for somebody's faces. Thank you.
I think good.
How do you come up with how do you think while becoming a about this kind of process? Like where does that connect?
It's like they're really circles, and you know, like,
Cool. How's the pizza? Good pizza? Okay. Because of time, we are going to crack on. feel free to share these after with me, or however you choose. But we don't have time to get examples this time. So this is one that I also really like, which talks about different aspects of your potential business, of like the types of people you're targeting, your seriousness, how rebellious you are, how you want to position yourself as like a close BFF or the New York Times, which is serious and. Which one?
Sorry, what's the C? Where it says brand?
Yeah, I was trying to wonder.
Or is it a G?
That's a G. That's actually Gorka, so it's old school. I copied this straight off Google. You can choose what's a friendly brand
Friendly publication.
or friendly publication.
Yeah.
BuzzFeed.
Lego.
Yeah, BuzzFeed's
Well,
pretty
BuzzFeed
big.
screwed us with clickbait.
It did.
Lego.
BuzzFeed's a
No, it needs to be a publication.
publication.
Oh.
The Daily Sport.
Daily
friendly.
Sport. It's a bit too friendly. And then like mature and classic. So it's super simple. Write these lines out and try to figure out where along them do you feel that your brand most suits. So do you have a product? Do you have a name for your products at the back?
Oh, sorry, our product.
Yeah.
Motive. Motive.
Motive.
Yeah, motive. Like M-O.
Oh, what's the motive?
Yeah.
Nice. I like that. I really like that. So you're probably more mass appeal than you are necessarily elite. You're probably more playful and slightly rebellious and friendly and young and innovative. Whereas if you're doing like I don't know, investment banking, you're more likely to be pretty much the opposite of everything I've just said. So again, 5 minutes. Write these down. Try and stick your line of where you feel you are. And again, all of these are like iterative processes, so over time, you might find that you change them slightly, or you want to become more serious or more playful, or your target changes ever so slightly.
Yeah, like how is that? What is the route to talk about accessing it as well? You want to open it on that? Because love is fulfillment. What is the route? Growth, sport.
But maybe for your kind of industry it will be better. And more authority.
You're going to need some.
So for the images.
Serious or playful? Bang in the middle, I'd say.
Mine was designed since long. And it's very like, it's very just, it's very nice, very playful, very friendly, very down to earth. So it's like,
What do you think of this one? Exercise. Not
pizza.
Oh, there's a pizza like a crust. Oh, it's like an authentic crust. Feels good.
It's good.
Oh, I'm excited.
Thinking about it as
I think
collectible.
this exercise is obviously very easier.
I'm guessing the way it's like, what do you kind of
Mhm.
ideas to develop and
how they see their brand.
in a mutual way.
We often have these ideas about a company, but it's sometimes difficult to be able to get them from your brain to paper, or at least present them in a way that makes sense. But what I really like about these is that they help you to organize that into like a logical linear method, which you can then take action on.
I think it's interesting because with a classic, I do like
Could you have a bit of both sides, a bit of both the spectrum maybe, or just
Um,
one or the other? Because
Can you give me context?
just see if it's playful, one playful to be a social side, at the same time responsible.
Oh, absolutely.
You can combine them.
Yeah, the different, like, again, these aren't the be all. You can't, it's not like you're gonna write these down and this is how your business has to be for them forever. They're, yeah, so that's true. And then also when you create multiple customer personas and you create different customer segments, different customers are going to be looking for different things. Yeah, but you have to be authentic as well. You can't, you shouldn't be something that you're not, because what happens is that it comes out in your brand and people feel that. They recognize it subconsciously through using your products, through your marketing and stuff like that.
that's hard. It's like
So you put it more
brand personality. I think it's both. It's the
Right.
classic idea that has died. It has been before. You know what I mean? Yeah. Do your circles.
double circles.
30 seconds. You guys too. This is a great day. Cool. So again, we don't have tons of time, so I'm not going to get everyone to share their ideas right now. Feel free to do that afterwards. Who found that useful? Yeah? How about you guys? Do you like it? I'm impressed you had. Well done. That's good. Okay, cool. So this can be a really great way of like thinking about your brand personality, thinking about how you want to portray yourself. Because a lot of us already have these ideas, but this provides a way of like writing it down and creating it in like a linear way. We have a lot of slides to cover, so I'm not going to do this exercise, but I will include links on how to do it, and I highly recommend that you guys do it as well. But it will take longer than 5 minutes. You guys will punch me if I give you 5 minutes on this, because you will not be anywhere near complete. So there are a few areas for early stage startups, particularly tech, to help start defining their brand. That's through name, image, voice, story, USP, and website. And basically, these are the main customer focusing areas, and these are quite B2C orientated, but they're areas where people are going to be interacting with the brand. Every time someone interacts with your brand, they're going to get a little bit of feeling about the personality of the brand, right? So if you speak to someone on the phone, when you last had a problem with your, I don't know, car insurance, and you had to speak to someone, and it took half an hour to get hold of someone, that is representative of their brand. And that is going to account for partially or how you see them and how you feel about that company. But there are other areas, so name, logos, like really, really open, obvious ones. The design of your website, the content that you provide, the channels that you use to market. All these different areas are touch points that work, that look at how customers feel about you. So some of the lessons that I learned was being authentic, and by authentic I mean being like what you truly want, what you truly feel. The problem is that when particularly when early stage startups create a brand, I find that they have this image of what they want to be seen as and versus what they are. And I'm referring to the startup in this case. What happens is that when you want to be seen by something that you're not, it comes across to people. People feel that, people understand that. And that results in like quantifiably different metrics, so lower engagement, lower retention, things like that. So being authentic is super, super important. Obviously with some brands that's even more important than others. And this is an iterative process. Your brand now will probably not be your brand in a year from now. It's like the customer personas. They update based on information and data and how people interact with the brand. Don't overcomplicate things, particularly brand or things that we're not 100% good at or understand. It's very easy to think, like a lot of these exercises, you're thinking to yourself, yeah, but I don't know what the variables are going to be in 15 years. I don't know how many customers I'm going to have. I don't know if I'm going to be able to IPO them, all those kind of things. Very valid reasons, but at the same time, it's also, there's no need for you guys to think to yourself, this is really complicated, but what about this, what about that? Like focus on the easy questions first and then deal with the difficult stuff later. And define expectations. And the way that the message that I wanted to come across when I wrote that was under promise and over deliver. And that's valid in everything. In terms of the startup, like a lot of being a startup is being a bit over eager and being a bit overly optimistic, but just be really careful about that. And in every interaction that a customer has with your brand, particularly in the early stages, try to be the best, most authentic you can be. And these will really help you set up the foundations and the building blocks as your business grows. Cool. Seems simple, again, but like, honestly, I guarantee you, like a year from now, when you guys are all successful business people, you're gonna look back on this and you're gonna be like, shit, that's really basic, but I haven't done some of these things. And I do it all the time, and so does he, and I'm sure you guys do.
I got value from Golden Circle every single time I watch it.
Right? Every time. I've watched that so many times. So, promoting a brand when you don't have much money is very difficult. Fortunately, there are a few low budget things that you can do that will help you to gain awareness. The thing with these activities is that they will help you gain top of the funnel awareness. So like awareness, acquisition, those kind of things that we discussed earlier. But very often you have to be really careful about like how many of these activities are actually going to result in you getting customers, getting paid, which is really the most important aspect. What you'll find is that some of them work more effectively than others, and that obviously depends on your industry and your type of customer. So try and track everything so you're able to figure out a bit later on. Like, okay, content marketing worked really well, guest posting on these types of blogs worked well, but we found that sending a newsletter didn't do anything. And what works now might work in the future, and what doesn't, yeah, you know what I mean. Okay, so content marketing. This is one of those like poorly understood areas of marketing. Content marketing, in my opinion, is essentially the process of understanding your customers really well, figuring out what kind of pains they have in their life, and figuring out how do we help them solve that through the use of content. What generally happens is that people send you so much spam and shit, right? Because someone once asked me, how many newsletters can I send? Or how many emails can I send to my customers every day? And I said, there is no real number. The reason why you unsubscribe from something is when it no longer delivers value to you, right? You read it, you think to yourself, I'm not getting enough benefit to continue receiving these emails, so you unsubscribe. Theoretically, if I was able to give you the answers to the universe, what is the purpose of life, and like, here's a bank account with unlimited money, you're not going to unsubscribe from those emails, right? Because they provide value. So as long as every interaction that you do when you're reaching out with people, you provide some form of value, people will engage with that, they'll connect with you, and they'll build a relationship. It's so much better to send less and focus on quality than it is to send more and not. And actually, it's about as easy. People make it a lot more complicated than it needs to be, but it's not easy sending, I don't know, one email a week full of like 2 pages of words. But if you send one email a month and you spend the rest of the time that you would have sent on like doing customer research, really understanding your customers effectively, you might find that actually that one email is gets you a lot more than say 5 months of emails of weekly emails. Did I articulate that understandably? Okay, cool. So I kind of discussed newsletters, content marketing. What I really like about content marketing is that what I try to do now more than ever is multimedia stuff. So every time I work with a brand and we're doing organic social, although don't bother with organic social, it does nothing unless you're on like Twitter having conversations. Honestly, I've yet to find anything that isn't a hot girl on Instagram that gets any engagement, or long form pieces on LinkedIn. Yeah, organic social is really, really dead. Everyone wants you to pay. But having multimedia really helps you with that. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, they all really like live stuff at the moment, and they will organically boost your stuff a lot further, even if the quality is like on par with something else that isn't a live video. So that's super effective. Creating really easy videos is a really great way of like initially building up your social media profiles and can help you develop a authentic voice for your brand. There are a ton of different places like Canva where you can create infographics and they get really great engagement, but make sure that the content is relevant to your customers, because there's no point me uploading an infographic to my website that is about making cheese if my product is about, I don't know, a CRM platform. Yeah, so quality over quantity and content. I wish I could like tell each one of you this individually. It's so important and you'll get so much better results, and it's not as hard as it sounds. The different types of formats that you may use and the different types of channels that you use should really vary based on who your customer is, which sounds super simple, but is actually not. What I do find interesting though is that some products you assume will have particular channels. So like, I don't know, boring B2B will be LinkedIn, but actually I've got really great engagement from say Twitter on like different things. So perform lots of tests, use multimedia content, focus on quality, try and, a lot of social media accounts are focusing a lot more on like relationship building. So looking at speaking to people, having conversations using their platforms receives a lot higher engagement than just kind of like posting stuff out. Cool. Word of mouth, obviously super simple. Give people the ability to, give people the tools that they need to tell their friends about your product. Make it easy for them to do so. I discussed this a bit further on, and I'm actually combining this with customer referrals. It is the most effective and the most difficult process to do. Convincing someone to talk about your product to their friends takes a lot of different variables, because they need to love your product, they need to feel passionate about it, they need to have the right types of contacts around them that they can tell them, and by providing the tools to make it easier for them to do so, you can help them accelerate that process. But if it's very much all or nothing from my experience, like either it works and it works amazingly well, or it doesn't work at all. Your mileage may vary. Hosting and attending events, I really like this because I feel like they're really underutilized. Whenever I'm attending an event nowadays, I'm either doing it for 2 reasons. 1, I'm trying to speak, or 2, I'm trying to get the free alcohol. Sometimes both. Where's my beer? You probably go to like a lot of networking events and you leave that thinking, yeah, I've got a lot of business cards and I've exchanged my details, but what value has come out of that? Creating a plan prior to like actually attending these events, figuring out who are the people that I want to speak to, what is the message that I'm trying to convey, can I be a speaker, because actually it's so much easier to do that. And even if you're like doing a 5-minute spiel about your product or about something relevant to your customers, that can be so much more effective and you can speak to everyone at the same time. And hosting events can be really useful. I had a Halloween party at a company that I was working with a while ago, and we didn't really have any like specific aim on it, except to develop relationships with the startup community. We actually ended up closing a third of our funding round at the time. because we brought investors in to an environment that they felt a bit more safe. They didn't feel like they were going to be immediately pitched. It was fun. There was a lot of alcohol. They had a DJ. We had a karaoke machine. That was it. And that worked really well because actually there was a lot of thought behind that random Halloween party. So if you can do something unique or interesting, that can really, really help. Guest posting. Who's heard of guest posting? I'm excluding you from this. Super simple, identifying blogs that, or like publications, writing articles and giving it to them. It works only if the content is really good, if the publications are really relevant. But once you're able to figure that kind of stuff out, and you can create a process behind it, and it can help you drive traffic to your website, to your products, it can help you build really nice backlinks. And if you write really great quality content, people take that as a reflection of your brand. So that can work really well. And if you don't like writing, you can get copywriters super, super cheap, which is what I always do. I take what I said about word of mouth back. Community is the hardest to develop. Having the best way to encourage people to talk to other people about your products is through having people who are passionate about your product. Examples of this are like Monzo, for example. They have a really loyal user base who are like ambassadors. They're kind of annoying. Also like Apple users. Like all my friends make fun of me because I'd always talk about my latest Apple device. But the thing is, I'm telling people about it, and now my friend's got an iPhone. And if you can develop that within your product, that works really well. Again, it is the most difficult aspect because it requires a strong brand, it requires a good product, and it requires people to be passionate enough about it, which isn't easy. Who's heard of Harrow? Help a reporter out. No? Okay, cool. You guys are going to love me for this. So Help a Reporter Out is essentially a platform where journalists have questions and they're looking for industry experts to help them solve it. And it's free. There's a free version of this and there's a paid version of this. If you go on Twitter and you search hashtag PR request or hashtag journo request, you can also find it. And I absolutely love this. I've been in, not me, but companies I've worked with because of this have been in like BBC, Wall Street Journal, CNN, Fox, and some others that I can't remember right now, and some like really unimportant places. But it's a really great way of getting your name and your brand in really, really cool websites. It's free. If you get a good piece in a good place, you can experience a massive increase in signups, credibility. If you're trying to raise investment and your investor searches your brand and the first link that comes up is like CNN, they're going to be like, okay, this person's not too shit. So yeah, you can use this tool. There's a free version and there's a paid version. The paid version is very expensive. The other thing you can do is go on Twitter. And search and follow me and then search PR request. I'm not sure if it's a double R. Yeah, so looking to speak with a new parent to discuss how well they sleep after having a baby, get in touch. And you get all sorts of stuff. So the difficult part is like filtering. But if you use platforms like Harrow, you can search by industry. So you get an email every day or like 3 times a day saying, looking for people in the health and tech industry specializing in, I don't know, AI or something. So it can be super, super effective. And creating a newsletter, and I kind of talked a bit about the newsletter at the first point, but like, as long as it provides value and it's relevant to your users, that's what's important. Don't send a newsletter because you're like, I should probably send a newsletter, because that doesn't work. It takes up time. You don't do it if you're not going to do it properly. And actually that's valid for pretty much like everything in marketing. Community and tribe building. So I kind of talked about this being the most difficult aspect. So we're going to discuss a few like tips and techniques that you can use, but it is still really, really difficult. So some of the really important principles are figuring out, probably after your customer personas, like who wants to be part of your community. So within your user segments, you'll find that you generally have like a particular, say, top 10% or top 5% that are really engaged and really excited and like talking to you. They often email you, they often use your live chat way too much, they often tweet you, things like that. They're the best people that you want to engage because they're going to provide a lot of content, they're going to provide a lot of the momentum. And they generally already are engaged and passionate. Most communities are spawned from an existing one. So like Monzo is actually originally, before they created a forum on their website, it was a Facebook group, which grew, then got shut down, and then everyone moved to Monzo's forum, and then that grew because Monzo invested in it. When you're growing your business, one of the good indicators of figuring out, am I ready for developing a community for my product, is there already organic groups that are being founded about my product? Is that the time? Time flies when you're having fun. At the beginning, doing things that don't scale, which was originally a quote by, I think, Paul Graham. You wanted names? Paul Graham. Okay, cool. Like, invest a lot of your own time into supporting the community, providing really relevant feedback. It's one of the best places not only to get customers, but also to nurture existing customers, to learn like what new features they want, what they like about a product, what they don't like about the product. And if you can get them on your side before they start going to Twitter and saying, this product is so shit, I never want to use it again, then that's great. It's a really great way of like learning new things. So yeah, manual engagement, like spending a lot of time on that might not seem really productive when you've got a task list of 100 other activities to do, but actually it can be super relevant and core to your business. Okay, so there are a bunch of different other activities that you need to look at when creating it. One of them is choosing your platform. Depending on your product, really depends on like what works and what doesn't. So we've got a bunch here. We're talking about your social app. That, at the moment, I was talking about Happy People Socials, which this guy over here introduced me to. And it's a really awesome and interesting group. And it was created on WhatsApp. And I think that's really interesting because like thinking about, should it be created in Telegram, should it be created on WhatsApp, like what's going to support its organic growth? All these kind of questions that, I mean, there's a lot of them. So it's really important to choose that sooner rather than later, because when you're trying to switch, that can really, really fuck things up. I used to own the domain, the onlinecommunity.com, which I let lapse, which is like my greatest mistake. I was so annoyed. And I created a forum, and we had this really random forum. Everyone from like talking about the best way to pot a plant to like the future of the Middle East. Everything was discussed on this forum, and I was super excited about it. And it was hosted on an old school platform called PHPBB, PHP Bulletin Board. And I wanted something a bit more modern, and I was like, okay guys, I'm going to switch to this new platform, give it all these new features, made it really nice and easy, transfer the accounts there to reset the passwords, but that was it. And like 1% actually transferred. And then they died off within a month. And that's actually why I ended up like getting rid of the domain. So stupid. But choosing the platform is really important, and trying to figure that out like sooner rather than later is super, super relevant. These are purely thoughts that I've had. So you might find that actually your platform is amazing on like Slack, even though you have a non-technical orientated group, but realistically that's unlikely. Slack is good for tech. Facebook groups are pretty generic and good for a wide range of people. They actually have the highest engagement for older women, so like 60 plus out of every like mainstream community group. And I discovered that in a paper that I read prior to writing this. I found that fascinating. That was really, really interesting. Who's heard of Discourse? Do you game?
Yeah. Well, like not for a while, but I used it.
So for those who don't know, Discourse is a bit like Slack, except I think you can speak in it.
Yeah.
And it is very hot with the gaming industry. Obviously Telegram, WhatsApp. I find Telegram really big with the crypto community, which I find very interesting. It's the only reason I have it. WhatsApp is WhatsApp. That's what Happy People Socials are on. Everyone has it, and I find that quite useful, but also everyone gets a lot of WhatsApps. So if you're creating a community on that, you don't want it to get pushed down to the bottom. And Reddit, maybe there's an existing community on Reddit and you might want to take advantage of that and help grow that. Alternatively, depending on what your product is, you might not need to be online. Maybe it could be a combination of online and offline, or offline. Although I can't think of any business that any tech-orientated startup whose community is primarily offline. After that, seeding, one of the first steps is to seed people, which is essentially try and manually bring people onto the forum, give them a really great onboarding, tell them about like what is the value of being on the forum, because we're all part of millions of different things. I'm part of like 15 different Slack groups, and I really struggle to figure out why should I be in this community, this group. It's either very regularly, it's generally because I'm already interested in something and I'm searching for it, as opposed to being invited to it and want to become an active member. Yeah, find your highest engaged people, try and get your friends on it. I'm pretty sure if I created a community and I was looking to grow it and they were like tech orientated, I'd definitely get my friends to, hey guys, can you please like just interact with other people on my forum? And that provides some content and helps with SEO. And when you're going onto a forum and if there's absolutely nothing there, you're not going to be very incentivized to contribute, but having some content will help. Figuring out who will get the most value from, like will it be actually the most engaged users of your product, or will it be the people who are like a particular segment of your product? Maybe it's the people who are having the most trouble, or maybe it's the people who find it too basic, things like that. So your user segmentation, there might be a specific group that is more relevant than others. And then initially at least, providing them with some sort of incentive. There's a lot of gamification, so like getting particular badges and things, like Reddit does that really well with flares. Figuring out how you can incentivize people is also super important. And very regularly, it's not with money. After that, it's content. So I know I've talked about this a lot, and it's a really boring answer, but like, how do you provide value on the forum? How do you, what makes it actually useful? Having a think about that is super important. Content people would like to see. I find it amazing how many people, you know the phrase, build it and they will come? That doesn't really exist. I mean, I've yet to see it. Originally, like creating stuff and sticking it there is super, like, I'm seeing more and more people who don't actually have a blog in the conventional form. They actually just upload it to their form of the community, whatever that may be. A lot of discussions, a lot of interviews, that kind of thing. So providing information where people can then like interact with it and build upon that can be really useful. Making it controversial means that people will talk about it. If you say, I believe this thing, which is really disagreeable, then people are more likely to be like, well, actually, my opinion is this. Be careful about doing that. You don't want to like end up on a watch list. Having easy onboarding seems obvious, but actually like create a process and test it yourself. Get your friends to test it out. The amount of times I've tried helping people with things like this, and there's like a 20-stage form that you need to complete, and then like your mother's date of birth. It's so, those kind of obstacles shouldn't exist and still do, because people don't check them. And then figuring out how do we get people if they become inactive? Do we, I don't know, run ads? Do we give them stuff? Do we incentivize them in some respect? Promotion, this isn't very useful, but like at the beginning stages, sticking it in your signature, sticking it on all your socials, emailing it to people through your newsletter or your mail list can be super, super useful. The most effective way I found is like literally piggybacking off existing channels. So one of the most effective ways I found of growing a Slack group for a tech startup that I was working with was when they sign up, they receive an onboarding series of emails, 7 emails over 7 days. And on the first email says, join our community, with a screenshot of like some really great text that someone posted. These are some examples of people with really passionate customers who really like the product. And what I find really interesting about all of them is that they have a really strong brand. Or at least when I say Airbnb or Lululemon, did I pronounce it? You know what the product is. You have like an instinctive feel towards what it is. And I think that is quite important when creating a community, so they know what kind of environment they're interacting in. Does anyone have any questions on that? I'm aware it's getting quite late and we've been here for a while. So I'm wondering, do we end it here or do we continue?
Couple of quick questions.
What's next?
Your next is social media, but it's going to be in the presentation, and I live on my phone, so if you guys have any questions about the presentation, you're more than welcome to message me.
Anything up for social media?
Nothing juicy, I think.
Cool.
I take that back.
Growth hacking.
But it's the best way to do this.
Skip to growth hacking.
Shall we vote?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Vote for one.
Vote on what we want to see.
You're not going to like my answer to growth hacking, by the way.
Okay.
That's
It's not what you-
controversial.
Well, actually,
Okay, so we've got social media, we've got email marketing, we've got growth hacking.
Growth hacking.
I'm not going to teach you how to growth hack, by the way.
it's cool.
It's not what I do. So, okay, fine. This is only a few slides long, so it'll take very, very short time.
Great.
I fucking hate growth hacking, right? It doesn't exist. Anyone who calls themselves a growth hacker generally isn't good at their job. And that's a very controversial thing to say, especially when I'm being recorded and some of my friends call themselves growth hackers. So I don't like growth hacking because it doesn't adhere to what I believe are the pillars of effective growth. That is being predictable, repeatable, and scalable, right? So any really good campaign or any good marketing activity generally adheres to those three things. The problem with growth hacking is that it is very often focused on vanity metrics, so things that aren't too important, and it focuses on unscalable activities. So an example of an early stage tech growth hack was Hotmail's Sent with Love by Hotmail. So I'm not sure if you guys remember it, but when Hotmail was first created, and you'd send an email to someone, it would say right at the bottom, sent with love from Hotmail. I don't actually remember it. I don't think I was born when it finished. But it did the same thing here, right? So people discovered the tactic. Gmail wasn't launched at this time, but Yahoo was. And then then Hotmail would do it, and it would work really, really effectively, and people were signing up, and it actually resulted in a lot of that early stage growth. And then Yahoo adopted it, and literally everyone else. And it became ineffective, and it didn't work anymore. When people talk about growth hacking, they generally talk about activities that might draw traffic, but doesn't necessarily result in money, which generally is the important thing. Like a sale that results in money. I spoke to a growth hacker recently. No, not recently. When I first started telling this quote, I used to say recently because it was recently, and I've said it so many times. It's been 2 years. Who I was doing some really boring work on a B2B business, and I was trying to figure out there must be a more efficient way of doing this. And I was having a conversation with him, and he said, stick cat pictures on your Facebook posts. And it increases your Facebook, increases your awareness, and you'll get more sales. And I was like, I don't think so. But my friend was the founder, and I really like cats, so I was like, yeah, I'll give it a go. We got tons of likes, but no sales because of it, and it damaged our brand reputation. That is being a bit sort of facetious, but there are other aspects of there are methods of acquiring customers or generating revenue that can be efficient, one limited time effectiveness activities. So when Airbnb first started, they scraped Craigslist. I always forget, I know it's someone's list, but I can't remember. It's Craigslist.
It's an American thing anyway.
So they scraped Craigslist, and they basically created this automatic email that was sent to people who posted their properties for rent, short-term rentals on Craigslist, saying, hey there, I'd be super interested in renting your apartment. However, I will only do it through this platform. And it's the same thing here. It worked really well for Airbnb at the beginning, but Craigslist found out about it, they blocked APIs, and Bob's your uncle. It wasn't effective anymore. So when you're creating stuff, particularly later stage, when you're creating marketing ideas later stage, it's really important to think, can this work long term? Or is this going to be a one-off activity? Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with one-off activities. However, the effectiveness, you have to think, is this actually going to result in more revenue? And is this worth the time that I'm spending creating it? And unfortunately, if you search growth hacking nowadays online, most of the guides will send you to like really, will just give you really shit information of things that won't actually increase your bottom line. And as I talked about at the beginning, like thinking about vanity, think about what really matters in your business, what kind of metrics that you're trying to change. And if you get too excited about something like a growth hack, think to yourself, is this worth my investment of either money or time to create it? Or do I want to create something a bit more sustainable? So again, I'm afraid I'm not teaching you guys any growth hacks. I'm teaching you why I don't like growth hacks. But fortunately there is a process, which is going to take too long for me to present right now. It is in the presentation. What I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to record myself presenting this, and I'm going to send it to you guys.
Thanks,
and then you
dude.
guys can have you can ask me questions.
Thank you.
I know there's a ton of information that I've given you. It's probably a bunch of different thoughts. I can't believe I took so long to do this. Usually we'd be done by now. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to give me a shout. I really love what I do, and I love talking to people about helping them do it too. I am doing marketing contracting, so I am looking for marketing gigs, but I am happy to give free advice over the phone or over a coffee or something. Cool. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Daniel.
So for anyone who's interested, we've got a Q&A coming up next week. I believe it's Thursday, and then we'll be running almost weekly workshops as well. So yeah, keep in touch with your project manager, and you'll be updated with